This is the N scale layout, and it was built by the model railroaders, started 15, 16 years ago, and sort of tells the history of Roseville, when Southern Pacific moved their division point from Rockland to Roseville and built the largest rail yard west of the Mississippi, and that's what this layout represents. This corner of the layout describes the buildings of the Pacific Fruit Express, and this was the largest ice plant in the whole world. In the 20s and 30s, it wasn't unusual to have 30 100-car trains of produce leaving Roseville every day, all summer long. It took 8 days to get a head of lettuce to New York, and it had to be fresh and crisp and ready for a salad. The cars would be shifted in out of the yard, and the hatches on each end of the car would be opened up, and the people would put these 300-pound chunks of ice in and chop it up as they went in, throw some rock salt in to make it stay even colder than ice is usually. This bridge is a replica of the original bridge that led employees from Vernon Street over to where they worked in the ice plant. And this bridge was the last piece of equipment left after they tore down the ice plant in the 1970s. And so we moved it over to Royer Park, and is now the footbridge that runs from Oak Street into Royer Park. Roundhouse number 1 was built about 1910, 1911, and it served the small engines that ran down to the valley. When it come time to house the cab forwards, we had to build roundhouse number 2 because they wouldn't fit in number 1. By the time that steam disappeared and the diesels appeared on the scene, we tore down both roundhouses. You don't need a roundhouse to service a diesel engine. This collection of cotton balls on a piece of wire hanger represents the cloud that went up when the bombs in 1973 exploded in the Antelope Yard and wiped out the whole town of Antelope, all 4 houses, and the general store and the Grange Hall. It brings back a lot of memories, people telling me how they got knocked down while they were in the shower or they fell out of bed, all those nice stories that people remember that day especially. This bomb explosion took place because the train crew had run out of their 12 hours that they were allowed to work, and they had stopped in the Antelope Yard, and the hot brakes on the cars that were World War I cars that the Navy owned were sandwiched between some petroleum tank cars. And when the petroleum tank cars went up, they did a lot more damage than the bombs did. This corner of the layout shows Old Town, and all these buildings are authentic. I gave pictures of the original buildings to the modelers, but they didn't all exist at the same time. This white building burned down in 1883. The big hotel fire we had in 1911 burned the hotel. In 1920, the theater burned. In 1965, the Rex Hotel burned. But the most interesting building in this, as far as I'm concerned, is this clubhouse. Now, Mrs. Harriman, who was the wife of the owner of both Union Pacific and Southern Pacific, came to town in 1907. She found the men sleeping in open fields. They were sleeping in tents. They were sleeping next to their horses. So she had her husband build this clubhouse, and on the lower floor was a cafeteria, a barber shop. First floor was a lounge and library, and upstairs was sleeping rooms. And when it opened in 1908, you could get a bed and a meal for 25 cents. Haircuts were 15 cents extra. That sounds awful cheap, but if you just hired on as a brakeman or a flagman and made 85 cents a day, 25 cents was a lot of money. Across the street from the museum is the world's only crooked bridge. The one you see today is made of concrete, but in 1907, 1908, it was made of wood, because the man who owned the land across the railroad tracks, the only way out was Yosemite Street, and some days you sat 2 hours waiting for trains to stop switching before you could go downtown to go to a show or go to the movies or whatever you were going to do. So he wanted to bring a bridge across the railroad tracks, and the state would not let him because Lincoln Street here in front of the museum was Highway 99. And so he went to the high school and he talked to the teacher that taught manual training, elocution, and typewriting. And the boys in the shop class designed a temporary wooden bridge. He hired a contractor to build it, real cheap, and he figured in another 5 or 6 years the city would get incorporated. They'd let him build a real bridge. Well, they didn't, and it fell down in 1929. The city replaced it, still crooked, with a concrete bridge, which is still in use today. It's quite narrow because it was involved with horse and buggies and Model Ts. Two of the buildings here in Old Town that are part of our history are the Opera House and the Barker Hotel. The Barker Hotel is the third hotel on that site, and today it's full of retired seniors. The Opera House was the social center of Roseville in the early days. It was built in 1908. It's been a meeting hall, it's been a roller rink, it's been a boxing ring, it's been a dance hall, it's been a dinner theater, and it's now being used as office buildings, and all kinds of receptions are held upstairs in the upper part that is the big, theoretically, the Opera House. It's never had an opera in it in its whole life. This part of the layout sort of represents Donner Lake, and Donner Lake and Donner Pass is very much a part of Roseville's history. It's just recently been remodeled, and we've added 200 trees and some fake water, and it's better than when it used to be the Roseville Airport. Nobody remembers we ever had an airport.